evening. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the fourth edition of Shaping the City, Forum for Sustainable Cities and Communities. I'm Lucia Pedrana from the European Cultural Center, and together with my colleague Adi Elaj, we are going to support the conversation over these 2 days here in New Orleans. The title of the conference is Designing for the Climate Emergency, and we are going to have three different panel discussions spread over 3 days. Before starting with the kickoff conversation, I'd like to thank, first of all, NANO architects, Ian and Terri Dreyer, for supporting us and for being co-organizers of this fourth edition of the forum. I'd like to thank the AIA New Orleans for hosting us and for supporting us, as well as New Orleans and Company. And I'd like to thank Bentley for supporting us and making this possible, as well as AOS. So now we start. And for those that don't know about Shaping the City, I'm gonna leave the floor to Adi for sharing more about the forum and what to expect from these 2 days of conversations.
Thank you, Lucia. We are thrilled to be here. We're thrilled to be in New Orleans for the fourth edition, as Lucia mentioned. So the title of this forum is Designing for the Climate Emergency, and what other places we can be with instead of being here in New Orleans speaking about that topic. The conversations over the 2 days are structured in 3 panels. So the first one is about Venice versus New Orleans. So we're speaking about the similarities, the differences, the commonalities between different approaches for bolstering our cities for climate change. Tomorrow we'll have 2 panels. The first one is catalyzing urban climate resilience and speaking about architecture and urban planning solutions to fight against climate change. And the last one is, the last panel is environmental justice and climate change. Now, as Lucia mentioned, Shaping the City in New Orleans wouldn't have been possible without the full support of Ian and Terri Dreyer. So both Ian and Terri have been part of Shaping the City in 3 editions out of 4. I'm not going to speak much. I'm going to give it over to Terri and Ian to share with us more about Shaping the City, time-space existence, and how have they been part of the Venice exhibitions. And yeah, Terri, to you.
Me okay? Hello. Can y'all hear me now? All right. Welcome, everyone. I'm super excited to see all of you all here, and thank you so much for your support. Thank you also for all the people that are a part of the panels for the next 2 days, because it means the world to not only New Orleanians, but I think our global community on how we tackle the next, or not the next, but the 21st century. So Hadi and Lucia like for me to tell the story about how this all happened. And a lot of you all that know me or know of NANO know the story because it's kind of funny. And I'm going to make a little fun of Ian, but it's okay. So in the end of 2020, we got an email, or Ian got an email, asking us if we would like to exhibit in the ECC Time-Space Existence Biennale. Well, Ian did not believe that it was legitimate and hit reply all and then included everyone in the email, including Lucia and Raquel, and goes, oh my God. And immediately our business development officer goes, stop it, just stop, and took them off and goes, no, this is legitimate, this is true. So we were over the moon, super excited, beyond thrilled, and then started this experience. And in looking at time-space existence, we actually decided to do something really smart, in my opinion, and clearly everyone else's, thank you, is that we started looking at what are the differences and similarities of where we exist, and what time are we in, and what is that space sort of look like. So what we ended up doing is mapping the topographies of Venice and New Orleans on top of each other, and creating this incredibly submerged experience where the topography actually comes down like spikes in the exhibition. we were so excited. We won the architecture award, and then we're asked to do the Shaping the Cities. And we've since then actually have sort of created an R&D department and are really working on how our city can be mapped to better fit climate change. What do the humans do? What do we need? And how can we save our culture? And in doing that, we found out that Venice and New Orleans have strikingly large similarities beyond coastal. Carnival culture is very similar. So with that, when we came to Chicago, I asked them to come to New Orleans before we went off to the Chicago one a year and a half ago, basically, or almost 2 years ago. And I was like, y'all have to come and y'all have to do a Shaping the Cities in New Orleans. We can get Tulane. We can get New Orleans. No. Well, anyway, then they decided about, I guess, 3 or 4 months ago, we've been talking about it, to come. So this has been an overjoyous 2-year experience that I am thrilled beyond all rational thought to have them here. So here they all are, Lucia, Hadi, Raquel, Ilaria. So thank you all so much for coming. And did that work?
Yeah, perfect.
That's
Thank you, Terri.
And thanks for being here. And I can't wait. Bye.
Thank you, Terri. So before we proceed, I also like to, I forgot about it before, sorry, that the event is also streamed on our YouTube channel, on ECC YouTube channel. So for those that are following us, if they have questions, please type them in the chat, and then we're going to answer to them later during the panel conversation. So as I mentioned before, we thank the AIA for hosting us here. And now I'd like to give the floor to Peter Spera for the welcoming note. Born and raised in New Orleans, Peter has been a licensed architect practicing in the city since 2012. In 2016, Peter co-founded GOAT, bringing with him extensive experience in commercial hospitality, restaurant and retail design, and large project management. In addition to acting as GOAT's voice of reason, Peter is the president of the New Orleans chapter of the AIA, chairman of the Gretna Historical District Commission, and District 2 representative for the Louisiana Architect Selection. So welcome to Peter Spera.
Thank you. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Peter Spera, as mentioned. I'm the current president of AI in New Orleans and the principal and co-founder of GOAT. It's my distinct pleasure to welcome you to the city of New Orleans, to the AI New Orleans Design Center, and to Shaping the City. I want to start by thanking ECC and Ian and Terri of NANO for asking me to be part of this incredible event and for allowing me to tell you more about AI in New Orleans and my work at GOAT. AI in New Orleans is a component of the American Institute of Architects. Our chapter is one of 8 in Louisiana and one of more than 200 local, state, and international chapters. AI in New Orleans has 500 members and is the largest chapter in Louisiana. Our chapter was founded in 1909 as the nation's 13th chapter and only the 2nd chapter in the South. AI in New Orleans promotes excellence in the practice of architecture, with a particular focus on sustainability and equity, and to ensure that all in the community value architecture as essential to the quality of life in New Orleans. AIA New Orleans seeks to achieve its mission to advance the practice of architecture through professional development, peer engagement, and advocacy. This year, AIA New Orleans has hosted 8 major events, planned the AIA Louisiana Conference on Architecture, and held numerous educational and social outings. We have 13 committees that work on a wide range of topics throughout the year, and I want to give you a few highlights of their work. The Equity, Diversity, Inclusion Committee has established a mentorship program that's increasing minority and women representation in the profession of architecture by pairing architecture students with a designer or licensed architect that is committed to helping their professional development. The Advocacy Committee has made tremendous strides in expanding our political representation in local governmental affairs. Members have attended regular meetings with City Council and staff, advocated for fair and insurable city contracts, assisted with updates to the stormwater ordinance, and spoke on behalf of membership and property owners regarding interim zoning districts, and also offered suggestions for improvements to the permitting process. The Women in Architecture Committee has hosted regular happy hour meetings throughout the year, and they're hosting their annual mentor dinner next week. The Committee on the Environment is in its final stages of planning for the next Rising Symposium, which will be held on October 19th and 20th. And that's just a few highlights from the year. What it really shows is that our committees are where the work happens that makes our organization and the architects that we represent stronger. So I started working professionally in New Orleans in 2004, but I didn't become fully involved in AIA until around 2017 when I attended some emerging professionals events and helped with the Future NOLA exhibition. In 2018, I ran for the position of treasurer, which was when I first worked professionally with Terri. Through the time that I spent with her on the AIA board, especially during the trying times of 2020 when she was president, I came to admire her as an architect, a leader, and a role model. I then continued on as president, as vice president, then president-elect, and now finally to my position as president. And as president, I have the honor to be involved in everything that happens related to AIA New Orleans throughout the year. That's every committee meeting, running the monthly board meetings, and a lot of other things. But what's the most interesting to me is that on a really fine level, I get to observe how AIA New Orleans operates and lend advice and guidance to make the organization better. That being said, this organization could not do everything that I've mentioned without the direction of our executive director, Amber Wallace-Howell, the AIA New Orleans staff, the board, committee members, and everyone who's been involved with AIA this year. Serving as president of this organization has been an honor, is truly one of the highlights of my career as an architect. And as the year closes, I'll continue working to make every event successful and to advocate on behalf of all our members. And I challenge each of you to become more involved with AIA, whether it's by attending our events, signing up for a committee, or running for a board position. Our organization's only as strong as its members that are guiding it, and we need all of your voices. Okay, so in 2016, my business partner, Colin Van Wingen, and I co-founded GOAT. The Global Office of Architecture and Taste is an interdisciplinary design practice that harnesses innovation and collaboration to deliver unique, contemporary spaces and structures to our clients. GOAT offers creative solutions in architecture, interiors, and branding. Great design requires boldness. It requires a willingness to take risks and experiment. GOAT is passionate about delivering innovation and applying creativity to all of our projects. So we often speak about architects as natural problem solvers and how our training allows us to bring calm, rational thinking to a multitude of problems. And a quality of great architects that's probably less known and less publicized is our role as thought leaders. Faced with issues such as equity, climate change, housing, and a range of other challenges presented to us as a population, our role as thought leaders is the most critical and most needed trait. At GOAT, we embrace the role of thought leader and tastemaker. We start each project understanding the programmatic needs of the client, but also ask as a group, how can we deliver this project in a thoughtful way that will be beneficial to the people who occupy this built environment every day? And how can that project fit into our culture at large? The pandemic and the ongoing evolution of technology and culture affected the way we work, employees' expectations of the environment that they work in, and how employers motivate and retain talent. Our role as architects and designers has never been more important. Building standard no longer meets the needs of workers, and it probably never did. Unfortunately, economic and forces beyond our control have simultaneously increased construction costs while also reducing clients' budget. Thus, we're faced with a dilemma. How do we accomplish the task of designing with a building standard budget without defaulting to building standard finishes? Starting with our project for local law firm MBLB, and then next with New Orleans-based Bellwether Technology, and currently in design with the accounting firm Carl, Riggs and Ingram, we've explored a range of thoughtful design solutions that'll not only encourage employees to return to the office, but also employers to train and retain their employees in an environment that's conducive to the way that we work today. When we're hired to reimagine a workspace, we start with seeking to emphasize what the frustrations felt by the workers in their current environment. The complaints with building standard spaces are usually fairly uniform across professions and employee needs, typically boiled down to a desire for flexible spaces that encourage focus and socialization, a non-hierarchical office layout, sharing of amenities like views and daylights, and an environment that inspires pride of place. From there, we seek out every opportunity available to address the first two desires in a cost-neutral way and the development of the space plan and overall concept, while saving the budget for the majority of the budget for the final design aspiration. And I mention this because my hope is that as you all listen to the topics presented the next day and a half, you recognize and find solutions for the problems that we're facing, but that you also hone your talents as thought leaders to improve the world. Thank you again for letting me share the thoughts with you all at Design Center and those of you who are on remotely. I look forward to experiencing the content today and tomorrow and hopefully speaking to you more. Thank you again to ECC and NANO for organizing this event.
Okay, thank you so much, Peter. So to continue, I'd like to invite to the stage Greg Nichols. Greg Nichols is the Deputy Chief Resilience Officer of the City of New Orleans. He's a urban policy specialist for the City of New Orleans. Prior to working for the City of New Orleans, Greg worked in the New Orleans school system for over 8 years, teaching high school social studies for 4 years, and working as a school leader, teacher, coach, and school support specialist for another 4 years. Greg obtained his master's degrees in public policy from Columbia University, where he focused on the intersection between economic development and education. While at Columbia, he was a program assistant for the statistics courses, where he developed and owned a love of of econometric analysis. While passionate about the great schools, his current focus is on using his analytical and leadership skills to shape economic and social policies, which will improve the lives of the community he has worked with here in New Orleans throughout his career. Welcome, Greg.
Oh, sorry. All right. Let's take a sip of water first. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. It's an honor to be here, and I very much welcome the opportunity. I want to thank Hadi and Terri for asking me to speak. And I'll have to make sure you get an updated bio. That one's a little bit old for me. I have been at City Hall for 8 years now, and over the last year and a half, I've led the Office of Resilience and Sustainability for the City of New Orleans. So happy to share a little bit about our perspective about what we're doing at City Hall to address the threat of climate change and the climate emergency. So our office was kind of rebranded, renamed, founded in August of 2015, which coincided with the 10-year anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. We were one of the first cities in the world to release a resilience plan, Resilient NOLA, and that plan had 41 actions in 3 different major areas: adapt to thrive, connect to opportunity, transform city systems, and really lays out a multidisciplinary approach to how we can address the climate crisis. And one of those actions was the founding of our office, the Office of Resilience and Sustainability. Since then, we've released 2 climate action plans. In July of 2017, we released the city's first climate action plan, where we called for a 50% reduction in our emissions by 2030. And then just this last December in 2022, we released an updated climate action plan that sets a net zero goal by 2050. All those are science-based targets in line with the idea of keeping our emissions to global temperature rises to less than 1.5 degrees centigrade. And I could say all 3 of the plans, you don't normally say they are on our website. We are going on under a bit of a website overhaul right now, but if you go to nola.gov/climate action, you can see our latest climate action plan. So what's in our climate action plan? Our net zero plan involves strategies in 5 areas, and the economy, energy, transportation, waste, and adaptation. So 3 of those are focused on areas where we create emissions, energy, transportation, and waste, and 2 of them that are kind of helping us create the conditions for climate action, the economy, and respond to the climate emergency. I won't lay out each of those, but again, I invite you to go to nola.gov/climate action to see our strategies and the goals that we set. They're very ambitious goals, things like cleaning our grid. The city council has mandated that Entry New Orleans have a clean grid by 2040. Our plan actually calls for a more aggressive target of 2035 to keep in line with the 1.5 degree centigrade path. We also have strategies around improving our recycling rates and our diversion rates. So those of you who live in New Orleans know that the city has struggled greatly with our waste services. I'll talk a little bit about in a bit about some of our future plans that we have that we're really excited about, that we think are going to improve services and sustainability for the residents of New Orleans. I know one thing Terri wanted me to talk about was our connection to C40 cities, which is actually how I got invited here. So I'll make a connection here with this graph. So this is the plan that we have in terms of a reduction by 2050. So it lays out all the different areas where we might see emissions reductions, electricity generation, energy efficiency in our buildings, fuel switch from ICE engines or combustion engines to electric vehicles, transportation switch from cars to walking, biking, pedestrian. A tiny sliver of it is from food emission diversion, and a very large percent of it is that green thing at the bottom, or the green section at the bottom, which is tree planting. So it is a very ambitious planning. We know the value of trees and their ability to capture carbon. We're a part of a number of sustainability networks across the country, which are, connect us to other sustainability offices that are doing this work. All of those are dues-paying organizations, right? C40 Cities is the only organization that we're a part of where we don't pay dues. And the way that we remain a member of C40 Cities is by taking action. And in fact, if we don't meet certain criteria, we'll no longer be considered a C40 city. And so there are approximately about 40 cities around the world that are considered C40 cities. They are usually mega cities that are above 1 million people. But we are considered we obviously don't have that population. We are what's called an innovator city. And so, we have some slightly different targets that we have to meet based on that. But right now, I'll be bluntly honest and we're not the only city in this world. When we did our 2021 inventory, we're not on track. Our emissions had stayed stagnant. We hadn't gone up, which was good, but our emissions are in 2021 were approximately what they were in 2017. So we have a lot of work in front of us to get where we need to go. One thing, those of you who live here in New Orleans are probably very familiar with this graph, and we're well known for being a city that's under sea level, below sea. And that's what this map says. You can see the sliver by the river, as we refer to it, which is the higher areas of the city in orange and red. And then the areas more towards the lake, which were developed and settled later in the history of New Orleans, that are more flood prone and have lower elevation. Unfortunately, we know that those areas are also the ones that map to areas that are poor and are predominantly African American. And this is one of the great challenges that we have here in the city of New Orleans. And I was very excited to see that tomorrow you have a session specifically dedicated to climate justice, because that is one of the biggest things that our city faces, is the impact. Those that are most impacted are those that are least able to withstand it. I probably don't need this slide, but the climate is changing. I did want to talk a little bit about what our climate risks, though, are. And I like to talk about it in terms of kind of 3 different reckonings in the last 20 years the city has had. Obviously, the most notorious one is Hurricane Katrina, where we had over 50 levees fail, and almost 85% of the city was submerged. But from that, we had the rebound of our hurricane HISDRS. I'm going to forget the acronym, Hurricane Storm Reduction Risk System. It's now in effect and protecting the city. And what we saw with our most recent hurricane, Hurricane Ida, was the levees held, right? It wasn't a flooding event for the city. And so that the engineering that the Army Corps, the federal government worked. And it is really an engineering marvel. That is what we call the Great Wall of Louisiana. It is the hurricane storm system that protects the city of New Orleans from hurricane threats. The The second reckoning that the city of New Orleans has had is and those of you who've lived here, is kind of our reckoning with our internal drainage system. So in August of 2017, parts of the city had 8 inches of rain in less than 3 hours. The system would never have been able to really capture and be able to drain that at the rate that it fell. What the storm revealed to us was that the drainage system had been poorly maintained. There were blockages in the catch basin systems. And it also had a conversation about what type of power that our drainage system had, and that the Sewage and Water Board, 4 of the 5 turbines have run on what's an antiquated 25 hertz system instead of modern 60 hertz power. So from that, this is in fall of 2022, the groundbreaking of the West Power Complex at the Sewage and Water Board. It's going to take the city's drainage system off that antiquated power system, connected into Entergy's network, and have us have a more reliable and power system for when we need the drainage for the coming storms. The third one that is probably our most prominent and recent, like I mentioned, Hurricane Ida wasn't a water event for us; it was a power event. It was a wind event. A Category 4 storm that really wrecked the city of New Orleans and had us without power for over 8 days. Parts of the city 11 days. And so I think since that time, I think there's been a lot of conversations at City Hall about how do we deal with our grid and provide energy resilience. And this is one place where I think the city has actually followed the lead of community groups that are doing this work. So there's a couple community groups here in New Orleans, the Together New Orleans or Together Louisiana group, that has been working to install solar and battery panels on households of faith around town. And there's a sister organization, Feed the Second Line, that's doing the same thing with restaurants. And now we're trying to do the same thing with city buildings, build resilience hubs throughout the city so that when the grid goes down, there's reliable sources of place for cooling and for charging your phones and other essential services. And of course, the hits always keep coming. We, of course, experienced our most extreme summer of heat, over 50 days of excessive heat warmings this last summer. Most days above 95 degrees, the most days where the temperature didn't blast below 80 degrees. And it's certainly the newest threat that we know is going to keep occurring that we need to prepare for. And then, of course, there's the problem du jour, which is the saltwater intrusion that is currently threatening the New Orleans. Although today there was some very good news from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers that this timeline that I've got up there actually has been pushed back, and potentially at least the east bank of the city of New Orleans won't be impacted. But of course, drought conditions have caused the Mississippi River levels to drop. It's allowed saltwater to get up the river and threaten our drinking water supply. So this is another climate risk that we know we're going to have to prepare for and have redundancy and a plan with our water system. So what are we doing about it? The city has had a number of strategies that I laid out about the Climate Action Plan, but I want to just quickly touch on a few of them. We have, for the last year and a half, been working with the National Renewable Energy Lab on some technical assistance around our energy system. Not only do we want to build resilience hubs around here, but there are some policy changes with Entergy New Orleans that we need to make to allow for what we're calling area microgrids, or the ability to have distributed energy resources that are connected to one another in the event of an outage. Right now, Entergy's policies prohibits that, and so we've been working with them to get some policy recommendations and hopefully go to the council and have some changes to Entergy New Orleans policies to allow for that. One thing that could be relevant that we're excited about for this group is we, in March of 2022, joined the White House Building Performance Standards Coalition. So what we hope to do there is to pass two ordinances. One ordinance would be to require large commercial buildings to report out their energy use, with the idea that transparency of their energy use will start to spur them to reduce their energy use over time. And then the second one is an actual building performance standard. So once we've got their energy data, we would pass an ordinance that would require them to start reducing their energy use over time with a plan in place and support from the government to do that. the third thing, I mentioned the Resilience Hub, but we're working with the state and on an application to the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund to go after solar for all funds. There's $7 billion in funds to be able to put solar on low and middle income homes in the city. We're also trying to stand up our own local Solar for All program. We're going into year 3 with working with 2 local installers, Posigen and Solar Alternatives, and we're really excited about the neighbors actually right across the street, Greater New Orleans Foundation, are going to be involved as a fiscal sponsor in building a grant program from some referral fees through that program to have a energy workforce development grant making process. One more thing in the energy space is I'm sure those of you who are here in New Orleans know about the residents of Gordon Plaza and the long saga that they have had with the environmental injustice of their homes being built on a former landfill site and the higher rates of cancer and other health detriments they've had. The city is, I think the last I heard this morning was we have now had agreements with 60 out of 67 property owners there for a fair market value to buy them of their homes. Once that process is complete and they moved out, and actually some of the homeowners have actually started moving out at this point, the city is going to build a 6.5 megawatt solar farm on that site, and it's going to be a community solar site where low and middle income residents can actually get bill credits on them and actually reduce their energy burden moving forward. In the area of transportation, we've been working with Energy New Orleans to install over 25 chargers. We actually just wrapped this up. There are now free charging stations at public facilities, 25 facilities around town. And we put a grant into the U.S. Department of Transportation to expand that program to 50 additional sites. So we're fingers crossed on that one. We are going after, we're actually out to bid right now for a citywide electrification roadmap to figure out how we can best electrify transportation across the city. So not just passenger vehicles, but other areas where it might be a little bit more difficult to electrify. The city received a grant to do a planning around safe streets for all, the ways that we can make our infrastructures more safe for pedestrians and bicyclists. Obviously, we've had some issues with that in the city. That I think a local article named us the deadliest city right now for bicyclists. So it's a huge concern for us at the city and what we can do to have better infrastructure and better policies to protect our residents. Around the areas of waste, like I mentioned, the city has obviously struggled, particularly around in the aftermath of Hurricane Ida with pickup. But we did just recently receive a $3.9 million grant to move from an opt-in program to an opt-out program. So we are going to be, once we receive the grant funds, sending a recycling bin to every resident in the city of New Orleans and multifamily homes that are smaller than 4, and doing a lot of outreach and education around that as well. Those of you that were here for our Mardi Gras festivities probably saw the pilot of our Recycle Dat program, where we actually had recycling bins on the parade route to be able to divert cans and glass and beads, and we're actually working with some other local partners, New Orleans and Company, several others, to expand that next year to have it go to night parades, more days, and more parts of the waste stream as well, things like plastics as well. A couple other things around our current strategies. We just received we got 2 big grants in the last month. We have an $8 million grant from the USDA to plant trees in underserved neighborhoods in the city of New Orleans. And we've also joined what's called the Smart Surface Coalition to work with technical assistance from the National League of Cities to analyze all the different surfaces that are in the city. They're getting a huge GIS database of essentially every surface in the city, and they're going to build us a cost benefit tool where they can look at things like cool roofs, green roofs, pervious pavement, cool paint, and what that would do for our ability to withstand flooding and heat. And so we're very much excited about that initiative as well. I mentioned heat earlier. We've been working with the city council and now internally with the health department and our hazard mitigation department to put together a citywide heat mitigation plan that kind of pulls together the different things that the city's been doing. I've mentioned a lot of these grants, but I think one thing I will mention is that we have a really great team that's been going after all the federal resources out there. My office's budget is $150,000 a year. And when I think about the challenge of climate change and the climate emergency, that's certainly not enough. And so we've had to be creative and aggressive to go after these federal resources. And thankfully, the Biden administration and the Inflation Reduction Act are historic generational investments in fighting climate change. So we have a multi-departmental team analyzing all the needs from the city and going after these different grant opportunities. Over the last year plus, we've won 10 competitive awards from a variety of programs, about $16.7 million. And then we've partnered or supported another 20 awarded grants for people like the RTA or community-based organizations for $145 million. So we're doing everything we can to bring the resources that the city needs to fight this climate emergency home. I've mentioned a couple of these already, so I won't stay on this too much, but a couple I haven't mentioned. We received 2 grants to restore the Bayou Bienvenue wetland triangle in the lower Ninth Ward. Really just design work at this point. The restoration is going to be much more expensive, but that's a water body that is just adjacent to the lower Ninth Ward that was damaged by the Mr. Go, the opening of the Mr. Go. So since 2016, when the Mr. Go, which was a shipping route, was closed, it is now, the salinity has gone down and it's now in a place where the wetland can be restored. So we're very much excited about that and working with a number of community groups. I mentioned the RTA earlier, but they have received several federal grants, one of which is to build a downtown transit center on Loyola and Canal. And that's going to mean that folks who are waiting for their connections are able to wait in an air-conditioned space and covered space. So we're very much excited. The city's has a lot of work to do on reconfiguring the streets around there. So we're definitely a partner in that city and in that grant as well. 2 others I'll just highlight real quick. I talked about the grid resilience. The state has put in an application that has several number of our sites as resilience hubs that we're hoping that gets funded. We're hoping that award gets announced. And then Entergy New Orleans, we supported a grant. I mentioned Hurricane Ida. All 8 major feeder lines to the city went down. So Entergy New Orleans has put in a grant to a grid resilience program through the Department of Energy to harden their New Orleans East transmission line, and then also equip the 20 megawatt solar farm they have in New Orleans East with a backup battery system, and it would provide the Sherwood Forest neighborhood of New Orleans East with redundant power in the event of an power outage. A group of architects, y'all probably have a little bit more technical expertise than I do. I'm a policy wonk, so I don't know if these insights will be as profound as it could be. But I sit in a lot of different adaptation conversations and thinking about what do we need to do to change for climate change, right? And I think that the number one thing that we have to do, strategies number 1, 2, and 3, is about reducing our emissions. Reducing our emissions is adaptation. If we want the climate crisis to stop, we have to stop contributing to climate change. And I think we need to, and this can be a difficult conversation here in New Orleans, which is an oil and gas state, we need to honestly admit that it is fossil fuels that are causing climate change. I was actually walking down here, and I think there is a statue that says, I think never forget, brought to you by the oil and gas industry, is right over there, and I had to take a picture of it. So I think as designers, we can have fortified roofs in any number of adaptation strategies, but we need net zero buildings. We need passive house design. This is my focus, the focus of the office, and that's what we need moving forward. The second thing I would add is just, again, I'm not an architect, but some of y'all might have seen this, but there was a New York Times article about the way Singapore was approaching their urban heat island effect. And I was really struck by the way that they had designed their buildings in such a way that there were multiple benefits happening from the design. We need that type of innovation. We need that type of co-benefit design. These buildings take natural airflow and reduce the amount of air conditioning needed in a building, because of course a building produces and expels heat as well, and actually worsens the urban heat island effect. That's the type of design we need in New Orleans. And then the last thing, and I'll leave it here, is that I moved to New Orleans in 2003. I was a teacher in New Orleans East, a high school social studies teacher, and I was teaching on August 29th, 2005, when Hurricane Katrina hit. And in the aftermath of that storm, there was a effort to connect with your students, and I distinctly remember that I had one student in particular that couldn't get home, and he asked me. He was very concerned about his ROTC uniform, and he said, "Mr. Nichols, can you go to my house? My family's in Atlanta," and I will never forget, walking into his house. Of course, any New Orleanian that has ever been here will remember the smell of what it was like post Katrina. And I bring that up as that student is someone who I always try to bring into the work that I do today. And I don't know what that exactly looks like from a design perspective, but I do know what it looks like from a policy perspective. 100% of the funds in our tree planting grant are going to be in underserved neighborhoods. The recycling grant that we have provides a recycling bin to every New Orleanian. Our Solar for All program that we're hoping gets established here is providing subsidies only to low and middle income residents. I would urge you that the people who are most impacted by climate change need to be front and center. And I was so excited to see y'all have an entire session tomorrow devoted to climate justice. And so with that, I will leave it there.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, thanks. Thank you so much. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, Greg, for coming, and quite honestly, that was so awesome because I didn't know y'all were doing half of these things, and I don't even know why NANO needs to present now because they're doing everything that we're about to talk about. But anyway, the only thing I could say is that we started ours 2 years ago, but I don't know if that helps. Anyway, I wanted to start the journey off and welcome my husband. Before I do any of that, hold on. I want to step back. Can y'all raise your hand? Does everybody know what the ECC Venice Biennale is? Okay, that's only half of you. So I want to just take a minute. Okay, the ECC Venice Biennale is, well, for architects, it's like the Grammy Awards. But what it was really put together for was in the late 1800s, it was put together for global and thought leaders, architects, engineers, and architects and artists to get together and to be able to talk about common world problems through art, architecture, philosophy, and engineering. And from there, a whole host of other items have grown, right? I think all the architects and engineers know Mies van der Rohe. I think they all know Denise Scott Brown. I think you can look over there and see Norman Foster. So what is amazing about the ECC and Lease NANO is that we are the first firm from the state of Louisiana to have ever been invited to exhibit, and then we won. So I feel like this is a great opportunity for our New Orleanians and our Louisianians to really take the time for the next day and a half and really see how incredible the Venice Biennale is and what the European Cultural Center, the ECC is how they call them, and what they've decided to come do and spotlight our city. And I really want to make sure that all of you all go up and introduce yourself to the speakers, go and try to communicate with them, because there's going to be a lot of wonderful conversation that occurs and hopefully some really great generative ideas for how we're going to fix the 21st century. So I wanted to step back and take all of that for you all. So now we're going to talk about NANO, okay, and our presentation. Ian, will you come on over?
Well, just because you touched on that aspect, Terry, I think it would be very relevant right now to show a video of what ECC does, but in shaping the city. So I'm going to ask our tech team over here to play the Shaping the City video in Venice 2021 and to see Ian and Terry in 2021 in Venice. Here we go.
Also here in Venice at the European Cultural Center, the second edition of Shaping the City, a forum for sustainable cities and communities. And we had the pleasure to have a very rich group of speakers coming from different parts of the world and sharing their point of view about how we shape the cities of tomorrow.
Shaping the city is a very big statement. So for that, we've decided to view the city in 4 different lenses, 4 different themes. Reimagining the city, climate change and resilient cities, building through technology, and architecture for the people.
As you saw in the event, we had such an eclectic group of participants which came from very different backgrounds and very types of research, which is very refreshing and really puts you in a way that to really calibrate what you're doing and really understand your position in understanding the future of cities.
In a sense, I see the architect as a curator or a moderator that understands different disciplines, that can communicate with different disciplines, and that can actually think outside the box and pull those different specialists in to come up with innovative solutions.
Climate change affects local environment, affects urban and built environment, and to increase local resilience, it's absolutely necessary to introduce adaptation measure or adaptation solution in the urban planning framework and in the way to design and prospect the future cities.
In order to also create a platform of interaction, I think it's absolutely important that people are actually in the forefront of creating new worlds in which they want to live and not worlds that maybe architects want to just create for them.
The most important thing is that we try to look at what the city of the future should be like, could be like, might be like. So in front of those urgencies, I think that we need to defend a certain agenda, as I said, for the future of the planet, no? That has to do with how do we mitigate global warming, what do we do about migrations, how about inequality, and what we try to do is to envision the future of our cities, the future of the planet, because we prefer lately to start talking about more of the planet than we do talk about the city itself.
But I think it's really important for me personally and all the people involved to take part in conferences like Shaping the City, because we meet here and we can exchange knowledge first and foremost, and from exchanging this knowledge that we experience here from totally different scales and perspectives, we bring that back into our own world and our profession, and also transport it to the communities and stakeholders that we work with. And as such, building capacity on a global level, I think that is what these conferences help us to do.
The importance of such forums lie in bringing the challenges and the urgencies of our time to the table. Shaping the City aims to evoke new ideas and set the ground for fruitful discussions, sharing of knowledge, and disseminate this to a broad audience. Yeah, so that's Shaping the City Venice 2021. And right now, since we're in New Orleans, we just want to continue the conversation with Terri, Ian, and Carlo to have a comparison between Venice and New Orleans in different perspectives and different lenses. So I invite you all to have a seat. Lucia, can you also introduce Terri, Ian, and Carlo? So yeah, please.
So I'm going to introduce all 3 of the speakers of the panel. So first of all, Ian Dreyer, founding manager and partner of NANO LLC. Ian Dreyer has over 20 years of architecture experience and has managed architectural projects for the New Orleans totaling over 36 million. Following Hurricane Katrina, Ian participated in full committee fields hearing supporting small business recovery contexts, and he continues to use his knowledge and skills to support disadvantaged businesses, enterprises through Louisiana. Recently, Ian managed the design, implementation, and constructions of NANO exhibits in the prestigious Venice Biennale at ECC and received the 2021 ECC Architecture Award. Dreyer is a founding member of City Park Mount Rose. Sorry for torturing all the names I'm mentioning. Member of Louisiana Association of Business and Industry, American Institute of Architecture, and Crew of Arms. Yeah, thank you. He's a dedicated husband to Terri Dreyer and father of Alexander and Luciana Dreyer. Then, where is Terri? No, I'm never gonna understand her. Terri Dreyer, with a Master in Architecture and Bachelor of Interior Design and Environmental Design, Terri brings more than 35 years of experience and has successfully designed and managed both new construction and historic renovation projects, valued over a total of 50 million. A passionate community leader and advocate, Terri is involved in multiple local and national organizations, in addition to being an exemplary leader within her firm, most notably serving as the 2020 president of the AIA New Orleans, where she succeeded by capturing 330% increase of getting New Orleans architecture firms to sign up for the AIA 2030 challenge, one of her goals during her presidencies. Prior to starting NANO in 2001, Terri worked in London for HOK, where she received the Royal Institute of British Architecture Award. Terri served as an adjunct professor at Tulane University for 5 years, where she excelled at both the performance and instruction of programming and schematic for facilities. Building NANO from the ground up, Terri leads her firm alongside with their husband, Ian, and business partner, managing projects of various sizes and complexities. Today, NANO is an internationally recognized award-winning WBE firm that has made significant waves within the local, national, and international architectural community. You don't want to read it. Then, following NANO presentation, we are going to have Carlo Federico Dall'Omo. Carlo Federico Dall'Omo, PhD in Architecture, City and Design from University IUAV di Venezia. Is an architect and urban planner. Is the research manager and adjunct professor in urban design and sustainability at IUAV. He supports and coordinates the development of the international network and then dissemination of IUAV research results with civil society and academia. He is currently a research associate at Fondazione Eni Enrico Mattei, coordinator of the UNESCO Chair on Heritage and Urban Regeneration, Urban Climate Pact Ambassador, and designated expert for Italy at the UNFCCC. So, welcome to the panelists.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. Okay. I think they're going to start the presentation. Oh, me? I have to start it. Sorry. Okay. I'm not going to bore you all with more introductions, but this is us, and I think you just heard about how fabulous we were. So I'm just going to go to the next thing. For what you all understand, what we're going to talk about here is this actually shows you the origins of how we came to be and part of how we created the exhibition Submerged Experience by folding the topography of Venice and New Orleans on top of each other, creating a topography of an architectural type, and then telegraphing that across the room to get you to that understanding of submerged experience and the idea of rising tide and where we're going to be in the future. We also then created a bridge by several of the designers that actually walked the space that we built here and then transcribed it over to Venice and had it shipped. And it's a bridge that basically allows you to walk through that site, through the building at various heights and experience it. Here's the finished product. And I forgot about the 14-foot LED screen that we were able to get to. It's going to be up there for a month to show you all the video that we produced. We had about over 8 hours of Mardi Gras Indians. It was pretty amazing. This speaks to our name, NANO, 10 to the minus ninth, detail at every scale. I think it's very important because we put this in an exchange of, not an exchange, but we put it in a diagram of what's actually occurring from a global standpoint down to, you know, the cypress tree that's slowly deterring away. So just kind of gives you an understanding of the scale of what we're talking about. And I'm going to hand it over to Ian for sustainability. Sustaining is unsustainable.
So as we began our research or our ideas into how we were going to approach time, space, and existence, one of the first things that sort of struck us was, for 20 years, the architectural community has been talking about sustainability. We grasped on the idea that sustaining is sort of stuck in the moment. We're not advancing. We're just trying to keep our head above water. And from that, we decided sustaining isn't sustainable. We have to do more than that. Just yesterday or 2 days ago, Terri and I were listening to an NPR speaker who was speaking almost the same language, that we've now moved beyond the idea of, or we've passed the threshold of simply repairing the damage that we've done. I think the statistic that you put out, and over the last 150 years, we as humanity have generated something in excess of 1 trillion tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, more than every living organism, the weight of every living organism on the planet. We have to go beyond. But going beyond is more than simply extracting or engineering solutions. As architects, we have to go to the next level and continue to be optimistic and to generate an idea of thriving.
Stand up. Okay, good. Okay. And okay, it's all right. As you can see at the bottom, there's a frog and a pot of water. And the whole point of that is this idea that you don't realize that it's occurring. A frog, when you put him in water and you cook him, he'll stay in there if it starts with cool water and then goes to hot. And that's really kind of where we are. We need to, it's like all hands on deck. So here we're talking about shaping cities and saving cities. This sort of gives you some of the headlines of what we've been dealing with. Actually, since 1859, there have been headlines about all of this. The power, Louisiana 2050 just happened 2 weeks ago. Rising seas will upend life. That's debilitating. So I don't want to talk about that anymore. We want to talk about what we're going to do to fix it and to be happy. We also show you the increased frequency of natural disasters, which are now in the billions of dollars that we're having to deal with, and federally funded FEMA issues that we have to deal with, and just increased costs. I have to stand up. I have to stand up. Sorry, y'all, but I have to do this because I can't do it this way. I have to like look. Okay, great, good. All right. So what we did is since winning the Biennale and time space existence, we actually started our, like I told y'all, the old R&D. So we started not just looking at New Orleans and Venice. We started to look at other cities, but then went back and focused back on Venice. So one of the things for you to note is in New York City, by 2100, there's going to be a displacement of 15% of 1 million people. And in Miami, you're talking a 94% of 2 million people, which really starts to speak of what are we going to do with the people. And in Venice, they have already experienced this. They are, I mean, in our eyes, some of the experts. They're trying to navigate it now, and I know everyone has problems, but we really need to look to them to figure out what they're going to do, what they've done, and are those the right tools for us? And so in this instance, just in 2 years ago, it was 76% of 35,000 people, because there aren't that many people that live in Venice anymore, and they live on the mainland. But what's important is, what did they do? What have they been doing? What can we learn from? This shows you, oh, wait, I don't know how to go back. Can I go back? This is New Orleans. Here you go. This takes you to 2050 and 2100. At that point, you're talking 40%, 500,000 people are going to be displaced.
So I'm just going to tag team on here. As you go through these generations, it's showing you the land loss as sea level rises, right? The southern end of the boot is gone. And you're left with an island. And suddenly New Orleans begins to look exactly like Venice.
Right. And I think as Greg was speaking, we learned a lot of things about our centralized systems in Hurricane Katrina, and which was a mind-numbing experience for those who were here for it, and started to see the frailties of the levee system. And then with Hurricane Ida, we saw the frailties and the vulnerabilities of our centralized system of sewage and water board and Entergy. And what are we going to do? How are we going to be able to maintain a city under these conditions? One of the other things we are going to point out, just as big overall R&D, right, is that we're not alone. The city of New Orleans is not all by itself, and there are a lot of different climate change issues that are occurring, whether it's heat index, large wildfires, corn and soy, sea level rises us, and we have a decreasing population, right? And even after post-Katrina, we had even more. This is important because it's going to talk about tomorrow at the panel too about the idea of migration, and that the people from New Orleans are starting to move already up north, whether it's Mobile, whether it's, not Mobile, but Jackson, Baton Rouge, and whatnot. And we need to be able to look at two things. One, who's going to stay, why they're going to stay, and how are we going to help them and save our city? And two, what are we going to do to plan the cities of the 21st century, those migration cities? That's a huge opportunity for all of us to look at.
And to tag on to that, part of the conversation tomorrow is about climate justice, right? Not everybody can afford to move. How do we build a city that sustains the people that have to stay here because they work here? They can't afford to commute. It's not sustainable to commute across the lake every day. And also, okay, we have a diminishing amount of land. We're literally becoming an island. Not everybody is going to fit necessarily in that island, or maybe not everybody wants to fit inside that island. How also do we plan those growth communities so that we don't repeat the errors of the past?
This image talks about the three major things that the city of New Orleans has been known for. That is the accidental city, the city that care forgot, and the big easy. Ian likes to say the big easy is not so easy anymore. But what's important to that is that there has actually never been a true master plan of the city of New Orleans. Now, I know they have the master plan of the 21st century in 2017, but there has never been a true master plan. And there's a great comment, but I won't read it. I hope you all read it and go back and look at it, because I think it really talks about even who we are as a people, which is we were raised, you surfaced as afterthoughts, and New Orleans is raised as an organizational principle, and it's remained ever since. So I really believe that, which makes us as unique as we are, and our culture as wonderful as it is, but that also comes with a cost. Here we're going to talk about the adaptations to thrive.
Okay.
We're going to go through water mitigation.
The presentation has changed a little bit, so I'm going to have to play catch up here.
That's fine.
Part of what NANO's approach was, once after the Biennale, as we approached the shaping the city, was there was this huge funding bill that was in conversations in Washington, D.C., in the infrastructure bill. And part of what we were discussing is how do you augment the engineering solutions of changing our transportation systems or our levee systems to also incorporate the humanity of New Orleans? How do you make a neighborhood both thrive during times of normalcy, either increased economic centers, increased density because we are suffering land loss, and how do you make that community also resilient in times of emergency? How does a bridge become the Ponte Vecchio, or there's several Ponte Vecchios,
right,
but an occupiable space above the water? We saw in Katrina, the photos were previous, we all remember the people climbing onto the bridges trying to get out of the water and baking in the sun while they waited for somebody to come get them. It's not disrespectful to our centralized governmental systems. It's just when centralized governmental systems fail, it's catastrophic and it takes days to recover. The community has to be able to be resilient and supportive of itself for those moments between.
So what we started with was that vision just now, that vision to thrive, which takes the impact reaction, infrastructure, impact of people, and government legislative. Public-private partnerships, the laws and codes need to adapt, the community interaction needs to become more frequent, and architecture, civil, structural, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing engineers need to be at the table to discuss the idea of urban planning and what we're going to do. There are 4 elements for a thriving, sustainable city. There's a society, which is inclusive, a government that has clear and transparent leadership, an economy of diverse number of industries, and an environment, which is the one thing that's been added. That has to be a sound and diverse ecosystem and natural resources that are available with coherent policy guiding them. This is where Ian's going to talk a bit about the idea of centralized, you got to stand up. No. Decentralized and distributed systems.
Sorry, my back's a little out of whack today. So as we were talking about centralized systems, and we've become a society reliant on centralized systems. We rely on our centralized government for just about everything, except for our privatized companies or our bosses or whatnot. And there has been a process pretty much post-Katrina where we started to step away from that. There has been some decentralization with the idea of public-private partnerships. You look at the energy, you look at some of the models that our resilience officers looking at. We've added a layer, and it's not really adding a layer. We look at it more of a historic precedent where people were more self-reliant and more decentralized. So that you become this constantly flexible society which has layers of resiliency. And in times of normalcy, the centralized government's doing great. We're cranking along. On top of that, you have a layer that backfeeds into that centralized system and talks about, and those 2 major primaries are driving along fine in normalcy, but in those moments of chaos, and it could be a health chaos moment like we just experienced with COVID, it can be Katrina, where the community has to become individually resilient through the ideas of microgrids, as we were talking about, or as our resiliency officer was talking about, the ideas of decentralized electrical systems. He literally stole the show on us, guys, which is awesome because we developed this 2 years ago and our city is actually responding and is, I would almost say, in lockstep.
So, and then the other part of this, if I'm going to go back, is the idea of distributed systems. Decentralized is more like school co-ops or rain barrels, public-private partnerships. But distributed systems is everyone has their own solar panels and so can go off the grid when there's a hurricane. Communities have an area in which to go to pick up actual water or necessities during those times of trouble. They have an economic base that's generated based upon a small radius of community food that they need. And that is where we're trying to get to, so that, in times of extreme stability, we're fine with energy and we're fine with the sewage and water board and we're fine with what is needed. But in times of instability, we need the solar panels, you need geothermal, you need an actual ability to go somewhere. If you can't stay there much longer, you need that opportunity, which then brings us to the idea of a program, which I think Ian mentioned earlier, that this was kind of all based upon looking at where funding comes from and what kind of rules that we could put in place for the growth of a city that would maintain or stay as a city of New Orleans or a migration city. Number 1 program is every project must correct or build upon an existing system. sort of like the interstate, right? Claiborne. Every project must bridge physical and perceived disparities. What neighborhoods have been broken apart that need to be reconnected based upon change in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s? Number 3, every project must activate space that is underutilized. How many abandoned properties do we have here that are in desperate need of repair, parks, stormwater? Number 4, every project must provide a duality of program during stability and instability. It can't just be one thing. It can't just be a grocery store. It can't just be a bridge. It has to be a bridge and a place of refuge. It has to be a park and it has to be a store. It has to have duality, multi-levels of program. Ian, did I go that right?
Don't look at me, you're doing great.
Came up with 2 years ago, ARCs, which are strongholds, cities, heights, hilltops, refuge, protection. We talk about water mitigation, elevated commerce, adaptive reuse, and then safe harbor, which is the one we've been working on recently. We call these place-based design solutions. They all have either microgrids or they have some type of a forest, they have a detention pond, they have wind, they have a bridge, they have canals, they have all of these. We've created these little nodes. All of these elements go into this existing structures that we have to create these arcs that help establish a better community in times of stability and instability. So we're going to take you through this quickly. The island analysis is called, we call it Island City Site Analysis. And these are all the systems that we studied for the city of New Orleans. But what's very important in this, as you see these circles, is that the average person at the age of 55 can walk 1 mile in 15 to 18 minutes with a backpack and not get tired. They do not, it's okay. They can do it. They can make this happen. All right. So what we did is we overlaid a 1 mile radius across the entire city. 1 mile radius is circles around the city of New Orleans to look at. Now, in this image, I want you to note that we are now, because we are going to take this until it dies, we've actually now put on the community lighthouses that Greg talked about. That's one of these people. And so then these potential sites are either abandoned or neglected property. So we're actually now starting to actually put these to work. And there's the 1 mile radius. The next is we looked at all of the protection and the levees that protect our great city. We looked at the drainage and the pumps, the historic canals and bayous that have been around. But one thing of note, and thanks to one of our great people here, Sammy Johnson, 62% of the city's carbon emissions comes from literally just moving water.
So that's pumping out water, that's moving potable water from point A to point B, that's getting rid of refuse water, wastewater, stormwater. Part of this overarching thesis, and I assume part of the overall philosophy of the next 2 days, is going to be fighting Mother Nature is not going to get us out of climate change. We have to adapt. We have to both learn the lessons of the past, because our forefathers didn't fight the way we fight. They didn't live the way we live. And we have to go back and start a more symbiotic relationship. And we can't use the energy usage on the systems we use is inefficient and wasteful.
Thank you. We looked at the sinkage from 1895 to 2000. Those blue areas have shrunk. They've subsided 10 feet. That's a situation. We also looked at the federal highways for emergency evacuations during the hurricane, when they tell everybody they have to evacuate. We looked at the population access without vehicles. So then we actually can chart where the most important or the first arcs need to go. And we looked at the income, which is a very big disparity, where we need to start looking at, put them in. And then the race, which I believe Greg mentioned, where we have a majority of Black, white, and then Hispanic and Asian. We then also took into effect the governance, all of our city council members and our districts. We looked at the zoning. We knew what that was meant to be. And here was where we're going to be starting our next round, is where the gas station, the police station, the grocery stores, the fire stations, where are all those little modes that we have to get to so that we can maybe sort of coagulate them together to figure out what we need and what we don't need in each area. Coming up to decide to look at these four arcs. And in this one, you see as an overall arching, it tells you number 4 arc is 30 feet above sea level. One's -3, one's 4 and 4. So we increase them, but point being is that we're starting to look at all of this. The first one is water mitigation. What's great is Greg used the same picture that we used, the picture that he had of Hurricane Katrina and that highway. That's the exact same picture that we used to create this. So, and with that, in the site analysis, we did the existing systems, the bridging of the disparity of the neighborhoods of West End, Lakeview, Lakewood, and Navarre. We have the congressional districts, the state, the Senate, City Council, and Neighborhood Association. And we have basically the multi-use program is recreational green space, natural stormwater management. It's also public transportation, habitat for wildlife, and during vulnerability, it's the evacuation point off the power grid.
So I just want to jump on here because I think we skipped over one of the things because of when we did this originally and the idea of infrastructure investment, we tried to find projects that were actually being debated at the federal level. How do you take a piece of current infrastructure that was built 30, 40, 50 years ago that divided communities, that is under the idea of being recreated, and how do you put in 3 to 4 layers of reprogramming without a lot of expense that reconnects communities, that adds pretty simply an idea of a centralized area of refuge in the case of an emergency, or augments our existing drainage system and water reclamation system, or our electrical system, or enhances our tree coverage, etc. So how we got to a cloverleaf, because everyone's going to look at a cloverleaf and go, why in God's name would you pick a cloverleaf? How do you best use the limited funding that all of our central governments are going through, right? We're a government $33 trillion in debt. We've got to make what little we have go as far as possible.
Thank you. One of the most important parts, I think, right, for the idea of humanity and architecture and design and urban planning is that this area would serve within that 1 mile radius 16,963 people. Like, we're trying to get down even to the gnats, right? Like, how far can you take this information and then also push against it, test it, right? This shows you the plan of how it would work. It's now scaled, which is exciting. And then sort of the images that we're looking at incorporating in there. And then we give you the square feet of the water management, the solar power, the grid to get you up to the bus route, the idea of economy where there's some small stores up there. And then this is what happens in the time of great need, a time of instability.
Right, so we're thinking about Hurricane Katrina again, and you're thinking about how do you serve people sitting on the top of a bridge in August and it's 95 degrees and 1,000% humidity? What do they need? You know, one of the lessons learned and one of the admirable things I think the city did after Ida was the mobile cooling stations by utilizing the bus system. Right, we're going to go park a bunch of air-conditioned buses around the city, and we're going to let people go cool off and charge their phones. It's a simple, easy, efficient solution. Katrina, that wasn't an option. We had 8 feet of water everywhere, and you couldn't get from A to B. What if the top of, can you go back a slide? What if you simply augment the existing bridge at West End or our other bridges with a canopy of solar power, with water reclamation, with some easy cooling systems, as much as the word's gonna geothermal, where you're pulling cool water. It's not, I'm not gonna lie to you, it's not gonna be 30-degree water. It's not gonna be comfortable, but it's gonna be better than 90 degrees. You know, can you generate a cool breeze of 70 degrees for elderly people? who need a place to hide. And you have a centralized location that everybody knows about. The city knows where to find them, FEMA knows where to find them, and they can wait for the buses if they actually have to be evacuated. The idea is preferably you don't have to be evacuated. You go back home with your gallons of water, your ice, charged phone, and you come back the next day until the centralized systems are back online.
The next one is, the next one's elevated commerce, which I think you saw. Here's all the statistics. During times of stability, it is a recreational green space and waterway. And during times of instability, it's another evacuation point. I think everybody who's from New Orleans has seen those helicopters in front of the American Can Company. Well, this is just right down the road. Once again, the stakeholders are all there. And this is one of the bridges that are to be slated for repair work that we found. It's another population of 16,000 served. Ian, go ahead.
So I'm going to just hit some of the high points. This is originally a WPA, I believe, project on Harrison Avenue. For those of us who like to try to use the bayou, one of the deficits is the bayou used to be a huge transportation corridor. It's one of the original transportation corridors into downtown. Most of you probably already know that. The bridges, as they're designed, you can't get a boat under half of them unless you're maybe on a paddleboard. So part of the idea was, okay, this bridge is dilapidated, it needs to be replaced. Okay, how do we elevate it so it now becomes a commerce corridor that could be an evacuation, again, resourced by boat instead of, say, by bus, while also looking at the neighborhood shortages. So going back to that original map of the density of services, the Harrison side towards West End is a commercial corridor that's rich and diverse, but then you have City Park, and then you have a food desert and a services desert. Can you augment that bridge idea such that it becomes also a public-private partnership with a retail or some sort of service that augments the sustainability of that community so it's now walkable? We're not driving 2 miles to get to Winn-Dixie when we can walk to the local purveyor of food or gas or whatever that community needs.
So this kind of shows you, once again, the square footages, exactly what Ian was talking about. And then this shows you in a time of instability, hurricane or whatever, this place is up and running. People can come and charge, and they'll have ice houses in the bottom. That's what we had. And connects the neighborhood of Gentilly over there in Lake Terrace back over to City Park. The third one is this idea of adaptive reuse in Claiborne Avenue, which has a long history to it, and it's not a good one. So what are we going to do to fix it? So I know there's a lot of arguing about whether or not they even want it to be fixed. There's some issues with not taking it down. I'm not quite sure where we are, but we knew that there was going to need to be repair and work on it. So we started looking at what can we do to connect the Lafitte Greenway over to the French Quarter, and what does that look like, which also can be used as an emergency evacuation route. Here's the site analysis again. Evacuation point, food, water distribution, shelters. And it's this idea of taking the monies that are all for civil and structural engineering to fix the roads and to fix the coast, but adding a little extra to the architecture and the idea of humanity and the people that live in the city and what we can do for them. And this kind of shows you that connection of Lafitte Corridor. The population served here is about 25,000. And here are some of these people. By the way, this idea for sure is not something that's unusual. It's done in Taiwan. It's been done up in New York and Manhattan. So this isn't brain surgery. This is tried and true precedent methods. And here it is in giving you the square footages of, at the bottom becomes a green garden. At the top is a bridge because there's like 25 feet. And you can have retail, you can have an evacuation right, you can have bikes and can go up and down. It becomes a better gathering space. Up there is the microgrid and control center with exterior solar. And then in times of great instability, we can actually rescue you from either you can go there up on the bus to the buses, or you can stay on that tri-level at 12 to the median level at 12. The final is an idea of a safe harbor where we actually start talking about indigenous people, our fishermen, our shrimpers, our oystermen. What are they going to do as the tides come out? And what are we going to do to educate the entire world about what kind of culture we have? And, you know, maybe these are opportunities for educational centers that are actually out there where they're studying the fish, they're studying the changing marsh, they're trying to figure out what are going to be the next steps for the 21st century. So we created set the Mississippi River Gulf Outlet Levee, and we're proving upon the local fishermen communities. It's a multi-use program. It's recreational, green space paths. It's also got a huge power grid, food, water distribution shelter, decks, docking stations for the boats. Here it is here right into Lake Bourne. This shows you the entryway and then the breakwater New Orleans levee and the protected harbor that we have. And then we start looking at what this could be for everyone. Solar fields, evacuation, a fishery, vegetation, green plaza, a harbor for boat maintenance, water for purification, even an educational institute. And this kind of shows you that this is occurring as well all over. Lake Pontchartrain has cabins, Baton Rouge has a water institute. Why can't New Orleans? Just saying, just kidding. Hamburg, cultural parks, crawfish farms. And then what happens in times of instability, this actually can become a safe harbor for them and their boats and their machinery.
And their culture.
And their culture that they don't want to leave.
And they don't have to evacuate.
No.
Right? We can't all afford to evacuate. I don't remember the exact statistics from Katrina. I want to say it was something like 27% of the population didn't have a car during Katrina, and a larger population didn't have the funds to evacuate. And for those of us who do evacuate, it's not a hurricane anymore. It's a few $1,000s you're dropping, and you're not sure when you're coming back or what you're coming back to. We have to find ways to be able to sustain here, stay here, get through the worst of it, and get back to rebuilding and get back into commerce. Part of that's our educational system. We have to get kids back to school. The idea of that, if you could go back one, Terry, the idea of this last one isn't purely our own, and this doesn't fall into the generic model of the previous three. This wasn't instigated by an infrastructure bill that I'm aware of, at least. It was brainstorming with entrepreneurs, with other engineers, with the fishing community, the idea that the water is intrinsic to our culture. The fish are, we are I forgot the logo for Louisiana, Sportsman's Paradise, right? How do you keep that in a constantly shrinking footprint? The levees are already there. How do you build something smart, off-grid, and with zero impact, or maybe negative impact? We have to start thinking about how we reduce the damage already enacted on our planet.
Correct. In closing, some of the local progress we list, and we've been reaching out to these local nonprofits to figure out what we can do to start partnering with them, what are they doing, and whatnot. So you see some of the charrettes that our team worked on in the last year. We're actually also starting to look at carbon neutral companies that are coming into the city that we're going to be reaching out to and that we're going to partner with, because this has to happen. It's like either you're in the cool team or you're not. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. It's what, you want to try to partner with people of like-mindedness that can help. So this kind of shows you some of those ideas. And then this is kind of our crazy mapping that we're trying to look at when we start with what that sustainable city looks like, the community, the economy, the government, the environment. What are those building blocks that we need? The city, the state, the free market, the industry. Then we have to go to innovation and natural resources and infrastructure, which then finally gets us to those elements to thrive. So it's this constant evolving machine on what's best. And it starts as a circle, and it may be an oval, and it may go to a trapezoid or whatever, or a blob. But we have to start thinking of all of these pieces in a more holistic manner. We talked about, Greg mentioned the lighthouses and some of the community churches, which are great. But wouldn't it be great if we had a strategic plan for all of them? Wouldn't it be better if we started planning and started figuring out where is those best places to put those dollars, and what does that real community need? That's what I want to communicate about, and the idea of humanity, because we can spend all this money fortifying the edge condition of our state and our country, but we have to talk about the human element and who are we protecting for, and what does that look like. So
I guess I would only close with this is more than an engineering problem. I happen to be sitting in the AIA, and one of my favorite engineers is sitting back there, and he's going to punch me in the face after I say this. But we're architects. We bring expression and art and culture, and we reflect those. And our solutions need to continue that tradition to enhance our culture.
we're gonna end with this small video. God, I hope it works.
Very interesting, very inspiring. What I have to say is that the whole conversation started with Greg speaking about the big picture about New Orleans. Resiliency, I think, is cross-sectoral and comes in different layers, and it's multidisciplinary. But you brought us to the architecture level and the human scale, which I think was very interesting. And I think we're going to delve into that later on in the panel conversation today, between today and tomorrow, in depth. But now I would love to give the floor to another person in which water is intrinsic to their culture. That's what you said, Ian. Carlo grew up in Venice. He is from Venice, next to the water. And yeah, Carlo is a dear colleague and dear friend. So Carlo, the floor is yours. Tell us about Venice.
Okay. Does it work? No. Proviamo? Sì.
Yes.
Hi. So I will stand too. And I'm going to be the Italian guy who says buonasera a tutti. Grazie di avermi ospitato qui a New Orleans e grazie a NANO Architects. Now I'm going to move to English. Sorry. So just a couple of words of introduction. It's definitely inspiring what you said. All your presentation is mind-blowing. For a Venetian person which never worked on New Orleans, but at the same time, New Orleans is not a place where we've never been. As Edward Blakely, the chief officer for construction, was one of the invited hosts to our university to teach disaster risk reduction. So our community, our academic community, learned from New Orleans, from Katrina, how to handle through design disasters and how to reduce those disasters. Couple of years after, in 2019, we experienced our Katrina, so we didn't learn that well or that fast. But so far, just a brief presentation of the institute that I'm representing here today, as it's the University IUAV of Venice. We are one of the first architecture school in Italy, and we approach, this is an Italian system. Into academia, it's very rare to have professionals, private practitioners, but our academia is based on interaction between inside and outside of academia. So our university is committed in supporting local administration into design processes, into policy making, and supporting local communities, as the one of Venice, obviously. So what you presented is something which is a key opportunity also for our students to see. So this is an open invitation to NANO architects to present also in our institute, because we do really believe that we teach, we research through design, and we teach, so education through research and through the experience of those who explore the fields of architecture through their own studios and practices. So briefly, the structure of my presentation, I'm going to skip it through that. So it's Venice framing the fragile equilibrium and its contradictions, briefly, ongoing strategies, plans, and commitment, and design a long-lasting vision, architecture between heritage and legacy. Question and answers. I don't want to spoiler, but I was so excited for the presentation of today that I wrote myself the question for my presentation. But we will use it tomorrow. So starting from part one, framing the fragile equilibrium of Venice. I can talk for hours about this. It's a 16th century city, so you can imagine the load of traditions, the load of legacy, the load of heritage that we have on us. And at the same time, we need to imagine Venice not just an urban environment lived by people, but it's at the same time also a commercial product. So we live in this very fragile equilibrium of these two images. You will see in the next slides some of the criticalities which overlaps on the city of Venice, but if we start from the hypothesis that Venice is at the same time a city and a product, a commercial product, can you imagine how difficult it is to change the shape of a product itself? Also because it's a winning product. We are overcoming the market of touristic cities, so we don't want to change actually. I have a quick video for you. Into a single video, we have all the topics, all the features that make Venice a product, a commercial product. At the same time, I need to thank you, the producer of the video, which is Marco Valmarana, a great friend of us. And as you can see, there is a lot of things in common between Venice and New Orleans, despite the fact that we have Vivaldi and we have Louis Armstrong, but still it's a city of music, somehow. We have canals, we have the carnival, but there is a large difference. You are living into a living city. We are living into a city which is at the very edge of the museification, in turning into really something which is immobile, impermeable, untouchable. Overlaying problems beyond the fact that we have a huge load of heritage to preserve and to promote. We have problems linked to over-tourism. Then I know that we have a question about the UNESCO blacklist. We have problems on over-tourism. We have problems linked to depopulation, aging communities, and of course, all the danger sets linked to climate change. Climate change, I have another video in the next slide, but before I want to tell you a thing. Climate change for Venice it's not something new. That's true that Venice is a sinking city, but at the same time, we are really used to high tides. Venice has a native adaptive capacity which makes it accept small and continuous high tides. What we're not ready to face are extreme events as this one. This is 2019, as you can spot on the side of the Vaporetto, and you can also imagine the impact on the commercial system, one of the core commercial system of the city, which is the system of the Biennale, which is luckily a positive economic system for the city. And you can imagine the unreadiness of a city which was feeling comfortable with such level of danger, and people were still at home during the high tide, saying, okay, it's not going to touch us, because it never happened such a sort of combination. Yes, it happened in 1966, but we were ensured that it was not going to be that strong. So we're sitting at home expecting the wave, and it arrived very, very stronger than it was expected. And the video before was presenting, I'm really happy to hear tomorrow a discussion about environmental justice, because the next video is a difference between the global perception of a risk and the individual perception of risk. I guess that some of you will recall this typology of sounds and noise.
Magari ho vissuto casi di amici, stavano asciutti.
So, does this recall you the sounds and the experience of Katrina, sort of? And we were not ready at all for this, and sort of in time and after the experience of 2019, we are more conscious of our city. Even if we are a city which is living on water since 16 centuries, now after this disaster, sort of we are more aware that the environment in which we are living is not anymore an ally. Is not anymore something on which we can rely for our economy and for our protection. This slide presents another fact. When we choose on the menu of the climate impacts, there were a bunch of voices, and we are, as all the other cities, so we wanted to order the complete meal. And so beyond the exposure to extreme event linked to water, we have also event as ordinary cities linked to, for example, urban Thailand. Before Jan mentioned the issue that sometimes climate impacts can overlap, as during Katrina people trying to climb the bridge were also exposed to extreme temperature. Imagine being into a city with these typologies of risks with no escape, actually, because you are surrounded by water, and extreme temperature. This is a research that we developed supporting the Venice adaptation plan, matching the urban Italians with the real estate values. I'm so sorry. I did that during the night with a huge jet lag, so it's still in euro and square meters and sort of it's in Italian, but I can assure you that it's more or less equivalent to dollars. And you can see that in the real core of the city, you have the highest value, real estate values per square meter, and obviously it overlaps perfectly with the highest concentration of temperatures. That's the reason why me and my family, we decided to buy another house in Venice. It makes no sense, I know. At the same time, and this is the end of phase one of my presentation, the question is how can we interact with these complexities overlapping on the urban environment? The first reply is that we are using coordination among stakeholders, among decision makers, and I summarized into this scheme the main approaches, which are, this is a synthesis of different approaches of decision-making and planning design used on the city of Venice. We can recognize axes, pillars, and cores. In my mind, I was turning this into a master plan, but I had not enough time tonight. So axes. The main coordination axes are considered by research, tradition, and experimentation. Pillars, academia, public administration, local stakeholders, private NGOs, and action clusters, and which is the deepening of my presentation will focus on action clusters, which are linked to maintenance and preservation, planning and design, and visions. Linking to action clusters, I want to highlight a thing, and there's another reason why I was really inspired by Terri and Jan, is that your adaptation approaches in your design approach, you implemented passive adaptation. So low-cost maintenance and multi-performative architectures. So you don't need to maintain multiple systems within the same project, which is not what is happening in Venice, as we have a redundancy of system and infrastructures. The first core is maintenance and preservation. The largest part of the budget for the municipality of Venice goes into maintenance, as most of the city of Venice is public, as public street, public canal, and so it's the cost of the maintenance is spread between the public administration and owners of houses and hotels and other properties. This is an example of an ordinary maintenance, and each of the canals need this periodically. If we don't do that each 5 years, we are going to have too much sand into the canal, and so reduction of the adaptive capacity to high tides, because you have not enough space for water, and the water will flow all around the city. And here I'm really curious of your feedback later, because also the city of Venice is implementing an adaptation plan, which is part of the resilient plan of the city, and my university is one of the main consultants for the side of adaptation, in compliance obviously with the directive of C40s and the European declination of C40, which is the Covenant of Mayor, and all the prescriptions. But you have to imagine that the contents that the officer of resilience that spoke before me basically are following the same structure. We are following the same elements. The difference is that we are filling the gap between the morphological prediction, the climatological prediction of the climate impacts on the city, with another typology of assessment. Basically, we develop a diagnosis based on architectural and urban design experience. So trying to recognize where the city is more fragile because of its shape, why a street is more impermeable, not just because an assessment is going to say that, but because we have an architecture team which is going to use their knowledge to understand the behavior of a city and to suggest an overall set of measures to be tailored to specific context. In this case, you see some remote sensed images developed using the Lancet program for vegetation, high vegetation, low vegetation, build-up area, waterproof on the ground. And all these layers basically constitute one of the core of the diagnosis, which is where the city is vulnerable, what's exposed into the city, and where there is a priority for adaptation. This is an example of the design super system that we developed for the administration in supporting, mostly in Italy, architects doesn't work really for administration. It is more used that architects work for private. So in this case, we had the need to support the administration in coordinated private actions with a coordinated set of indicators. These basically provide a set of KPIs, of required KPIs for adaptation measures. This is after 2019. This is the island of Pellestrina, one of the two islands separating the Venice Lagoon to the Adriatic Sea. And between these islands, there's the inlets where Mose is. I'm going to show you that in the next slides. And actually, on those remote islands of the lagoon is the only place where people actually died in 2019. We have lost 4 people in a city of Venice, which is already adapt to extreme high tide. We lost only 4 people. That can describe the reality of the adaptive capacity of a city. Visions. So this is basically beyond the capacity of a single design project, the maintenance of the city, or the ambition of the plans. We have this system, which is the Mose, which is what I was describing before. So this is the Adriatic Sea, this is the Venice Lagoon, and this is the place where you can find gondolas. And these 3 are the inlets separating the sea from the lagoon. And each 6 hours, we have the water coming from the sea, going into the lagoon, and vice versa. And during extreme event, the pressure from the sea is rising so much that we needed to build this typology of mobile barriers, preserving the daily equilibrium, the daily exchange of water between the lagoon and the sea. That to preserve the nature-based solution, the ecosystem, and the performances of this ecosystem in protecting the city itself. That's the reason why we didn't build large dams, and that's all. We built these because we need to preserve this equilibrium between salty water and fresh water. Talking about Mose is not always easy. We started designing Mose actually 40 years ago after 1966, the real large high tide. And it's not always easy to talk about this infrastructure because it was really controversial in its implementation. We exchanged different, it's exactly what Jan said before. We are really attached to our tradition and to our roots into the sea. That's why it was something really untouchable to redesign the way in which Venice was relating with the sea itself. So talking about this is really something, it's an open wound for the city. Just in these last 2 years, we are reconsidering the role of the Mose itself in protecting the city, because actually it really is stopping high tides coming into the city. Before getting to the third part of my presentation, as the good Italian as I am, I cannot avoid a Latin quotation. And so this is a phrase from Seneca saying that we can afford everything, but we cannot afford not to act. And actually, the way in which we are acting is highlighting a large gap at least basing on the case of Venice. It sounds like we are stepping back as architect from our rule into the transformation of our environment. We are letting others, and I hope, Jan, that your friend, your engineer friend is not going to punch me too. Ensure me this, please, you're bigger than me. So we're letting these engineers, climatologists, politicians designing the space for us. We are, as architects, the only one which can tailor measures, tailor pages and pages of abacus of measures to specific conditions, driving the design to community needs and expending more money, probably, but still, this is a representative case. Before Terri showed you was the forecast of sea level rise also for Venice. Actually, is not that possible to forecast sea level rise for the North Adriatic Sea, as it's a sub-basin of the Mediterranean, so large model of forecasts actually are not that precise for us. But at the same time, this is, it comes from the Biennale of 2014, I guess, but not from ECC. This is a visualization of how Venice can turn with an high tide, with a sea level rise that high. So basically, it became an artificial basin, an island within an island. Going through the next phases, and here I'm going to talk more as an architect living into an academia, highlighting the role of architects and the possible and the needed collaboration between stories coming from our cities, which is a shared tradition. A shared tradition which is already existing. If Venice has a story to tell, is thanks to international architects which came from another context. They came to Venice and they started designing Venice. Obviously, there is always this temptation. Venice is a 16th century lasting city, so for an architect it is a large temptation to design something there, to be part of history. But at the same time, it's extremely relevant how architects coming from all over the world, mostly from the US and France, but when they arrived to Venice, they understood Venice precisely, and they got back this message back home. The first two, for those who are architects here, in the slide before, are John Ruskin at the Stone of Venice, and the other one is Frank Lloyd Wright, the design for Palazzo Miseri, which is a beautiful palazzo. It was not realized using the design of Frank Lloyd Wright, but it's a beautiful palazzo on the Canal Grande. And these two guys, one is Le Corbusier and the other one is Louis Kahn. And what it was trying to present here is that most of us as architects, we were trained into architecture school. We studied this, we studied Venice, but we studied their thought, their impressions of Venice. We didn't study, actually, I didn't study that too, coming from Venice. We didn't study the way in which they learned, the subtle difference, the subtle lesson of the capacity of a city to adapt. And we are missing that lesson in our day way in which we design our architecture. This is another last example, which is Il Teatro del Mondo from Aldo Rossi, and a lucky find from My Jet Lag, which is not this, but it's this one. That's to say that actually, and I was not expecting this at all, this mutual tradition is not just an hypothesis that we developed together, but it's something which is really possible. So the invitation in developing a sort of community of designing endangered city is something which is really possible and really rooted in an international tradition for design. So my presentation is going to end as I said that these three questions are for tomorrow. Thank you.
Carlo. Thank you so much for your presentation, and thank you for taking us on a journey, a sensorial journey into Venice, let's say, and giving us, to everyone who hasn't been to Venice or hasn't been to Venice recently, that's a nice highlight about everything that is happening. I'm afraid we're running overtime. We've been carried on by the presentations, but we always have time to discuss tomorrow. But I just want to ask one question, because that's one burning question, let's say, that has been highlighted within both of your presentations, and it's been a commonality between New Orleans and Venice that has been really interesting to share. So I would like to hear from you both. So starting from New Orleans. So the federal government has allocated, so the new infrastructure bill has allocated large amounts of money. Greg highlighted one of those aspects, to invest in bridges, in roads, in airports. So that's a large amount of traction, right? And most of the money goes to civil engineering. So by building these huge infrastructure projects or belts around the city, so these belts, which are similar to the ones that have been done in Venice, similar to Mose, that has started in 1966 and only been operative for 3 years. And in particular, I just want to raise the attention and highlight this. 4th of October, so yesterday, marks only 3 years where Mose has been active, and it's been up, I quote, 54 times only since the beginning, to protect the city 54 times. So as architects, as we're fortifying the land through engineering and the coast, what can we do as architects to fortify the people who are actually living there? What about the human conditions? Let's bring it down to the human scale and the human level. What else could we build? How can you maximize every single dollar that we have to make it as much as impactful as possible for the communities?
You're gonna make me go. It's almost where we began this process, right? Is how do you maximize this engineering feat? And I'm going to diverge for a moment and just talk about what is worth saving, right? How does the federal government come in and build a walled city if we don't fortify the people within it? Tomorrow we're going to talk about climate and justice, and we also have to talk about the mistakes that we've made in the past and the lessons of our forefathers that I mentioned before, that we clearly forgot the idea of slab on grade construction in the middle of a swamp city. Obviously, I don't think that was a sound architectural solution. How do you deal with an idea of a first floor construction that is resilient? What is the use? But how does it also become not just a leftover? We have accessibility issues by code. We have egress issues by code. You have parking. I think of Miami and their infrastructure improvements, where they've elevated roads and elevated infrastructure, but they forgot to elevate the front doors of the houses, right? So suddenly people are walking down steps to go into their front door, which is really just a gutter. And so when we talk about federal dollars flowing into infrastructure, housing is infrastructure for a city. If you don't have people, what are you building the wall for? And I think I'm going to leave it there, and I'm going to pass it off to Terri.
I'm going to talk a little bit about the big picture, a little different, and pick up on the people and the culture and what's important for the reasons for saving the city, why we even looked at Venice in the first place, and we're so excited and intrigued because there are so many similarities and so many similar problems. One of the major driving points on our 4 programs to thrive is that it had to build upon an existing system. If there's $4 billion coming to the state of Louisiana for infrastructure, why are we not taking some of that money and starting to look at what we're going to do to help the people thrive? What are we doing beyond low income housing or housing, period, housing? Where's the economy? Where is the, what do they call it? Catastrophe economies. What are we doing to generate income? What are we doing to generate prosperity? What are we doing to allow them to thrive? Allow all of us, and I'm not just saying them, I'm saying me too. That's what bothers me, is that we're spending so much time, and Carlos and I talked about this before, we're spending so much money fortifying our coastal restoration, and tomorrow Charles Sutcliffe is going to talk about this, and it's the most important thing, I know, but if you spend a little bit more dollars, we could actually then start talking about how to better those lives, or talk about a safe harbor for the fisheries, or how can we build resiliency centers that are coagulating around communities within a 1 mile radius. Providing those big picture plans is what I think our community and our culture needs to survive, because I think it's worth saving.
I have 1,000 of microphones with me now. Okay, that's fine. No, just this is a very good question, and I want to bring to you another story from Venice. After 1966, it was an extreme weather condition all around Italy. Rome was flooded, Florence was flooded, Venice was flooded. The Italian government decided to invest money into those cities with this is a so-called legge speciale, is a special law for these cities, supporting private owners of houses in maintenance, maintaining houses. So an average family would have money for the restoration of their house. Maintenance of houses in Venice, considering the sense of belonging that the community of Venice has into their houses and the history and the tradition of those houses, is super expensive, at least 30% more expensive than maintaining an ordinary city. So those resources were super important in preserving the maintenance and the ordinary strength of the city. To develop the infrastructure of Mose, all those resources were drained into the single bet, into the single large infrastructure. And so for almost 15 years, the city center was abandoned in terms of support, economic support for maintenance. That's one of the reasons why the city depopulated. The people just displaced into another place because it was not affordable. So what you said is exactly that. It's the choice that we didn't in investing a little bit more, but diversifying the investment, diversifying in having more strong communities on multiple sides of adaptation. It's economical adaptation, it's social adaptation, is integration. The topic that we're going to talk about tomorrow about environmental justice is a real core of the problems that we did not overcome yet. So, yes.
And that's the other part of the thought leaders and our leaders of our city. You know, we've got a huge investment in tourism, similar to y'all. But tourism, as Ian has pointed out yesterday, doesn't glean the most opportune jobs, right? So what are we going to do to show that the people that are dishwashers or your waitresses, they are just as important, and keep that business and that cycle alive, and are important to our community. They have children, they have education that they have to pay for. And it's this idea of educating. And I just think that there needs to be a bigger conversation about how to spend money and what are the big ideas that we need to put in place, not just the small ones.
Do you want to?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I didn't know y'all were working on some of these things, particularly around the reconnect. You mentioned the grant, the Reconnecting Communities grant, and that's actually something our office has put in a grant partnered with the state of Louisiana on the Department of Transportation. So there are future grant opportunities. Let's talk is the first thought that I have around that. The federal investment, I would say, to happen here in New Orleans, I think, Terri, you touched on it well, it's not just infrastructure, it's people. And I think, the creation of good paying jobs and the just transition away from a fossil fuel industry to a renewable energy economy, I think is one of the focuses that we have on the city. And really, we do need to diversify our economy here, and we need to grow good paying green jobs for folks. And I think that's where, the federal government's investments around Justice 40 and ensuring that 40% of the benefits of all of the funding goes to underserved communities has been really beneficial and is a win for the city of New Orleans.
Thank you, Greg. That was great. So I want to pick up on just one thing. I'm not sure, Lucia, if I'm doing well on time, but just one last comment from each and every one of you before we wrap up today and then we move to tomorrow. So I just want to echo something that you mentioned, Terri in particular. So change starts at small levels, right? And the triple P's, which are people, profit, planet, of sustainability, are the elements to thrive that you mentioned in your presentation, are essential in building resiliency. Also, Carlo, you touched on that. You touched on the action clusters in comparison to the place-based design solutions that ARCs. So as architects, we can be the change. We can do the change, and we can have a kind of system to avoid catastrophes and to avoid different problems. So how do you enforce with the other layers and different networks within the city that are vulnerable? To reiterate, change starts at a small level, right? What kind of networks of small changes that grow and make a large impact? Based on what you mentioned regarding ARCs and regarding the action clusters.
You're going to ask me to start again. I think that small step is about education. I think it's about community. I think it's about moments like this, but not surrounded by our close-knit little group of architects because we're talking in our own bubble. It's about us as, I wouldn't say community leaders, but let's say subject matter experts to get out to our communities with the help of our public partners as well as our private funding partners to get out into the community and do either small R&D projects, or it's a community charrette, or it's an invitation to the public to come to things like this, but also we have to go to them.
I was going to say it's the ECC. That would be the solution to the problem. One of the other things that I would mention, yes, it's about education, but it's almost, for me, it's about screaming at the top of your lungs. The fact that we've been ostriches for so long with our head in the sand makes me crazy. So screaming that, yes, this is happening and we need to find some solutions. Well, I think that you can always make lemonade out of lemons. You can always turn something bad. And yes, we quote, Peter said it, we love to think of ourselves as problem solvers, but we actually are. And we have a host of incredible engineers and teams of wonderful people that care. But it's about time that we have to start talking about it and communicating about it and discussing it and admit it, I guess, in a weird way. It's like half the problem that you have is admitting you have the problem. Well, that's what we do. We have to talk about the fact that we have a problem and come up with some good ideas. But I don't ever want to talk about small changes as not enough, because that's not what I'm about to say. But for things like this, it takes big vision to start thinking big. You may only get half of that big done, but you have to think big. And that's what worries me, is I don't want to give a bunch of money to do something small because small's not going to make it. We have to talk about big stuff, and that's hard, but education and communicating, yes.
I would say that NANO is the answer to the problem. No. But actually, no, but actually, what you said is architects most of the time they develop bubbles and you just talk inside your bubble, or you develop super competitive firms, but you're not really committed. Why should you? Why should you be committed? You already have a very good business. You are developing your own money. So why you should commit to the community to which you belong? Even if you belong to a community, and even if you don't live into a bubble because you are becoming the establishment. That's the point. But as architects, we are trained to be part of a community, to respond to problems, to people's problems, even if they're our clients or even the public could be our client. So yes, is this typology of context that can accelerate more action, and also these opportunities developed by ACC and by you in letting an officer from the New Orleans municipality understand that these projects exist is something. You're offering something to them, and you can use you. That's exactly what happened to us with our municipality. As a university, we were developing researches, operative researches, and that happened that we are their consultant. Right. So that's exactly this, talking.
It's just a good point you just made about engagement and these large competitive firms, and you bring them in and you think they can solve the problems, but they all went to the same school as us. They just started a big firm. And the bottom line is that the person that lives in the community is the one that cares the most because you're vested. You have to care. Yeah, that's true.
I mean, I feel, you want to say something, Greg? I'm good. Yeah? I mean, I feel honored when you say that ACC or are able to do that. But that is also part of the forum that we try to do here at Shaping the City. It's try to bring different voices and different lenses all together on one table and have these kind of discussions. Now, I'm sorry this discussion has to be cut short because we have to be somewhere else and we have to go outside. Because I really wanted to delve into the idea of education, the idea of community in our next questions, because I think that is a pillar that we need to push forward. Carlo, you come from a university. You've been part of the university, you've been adjunct professors for many years. So that is something I think crucial to tackle and to tap into. But I think we can speak about that tomorrow in the closing session, which is called The Way Forward. I'm sorry to cut this short, but I will hand it over to Lucia to tell us what's happening next.
So we are also gonna talk about the role of culture in this conversation, hopefully tomorrow. But for now, I'd like to thank you, our speakers. I'd like to thank you, all of you here at the AIA Design Center. And I'd like to invite you to have a glass of wine all together and to visit the exhibition that is here at the Design Center. And of course, to meet tomorrow morning at 8:30 at the Ogden Museum next door to continue this conversation. Thank you very much and have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thanks.